Well, hello. My name is Marcus Ruiz-Evans, Mark Ruiz-Evans. We're having another expose show today on the topic of homelessness in California. That's something we've covered extensively over the last year and a half. Now, as you may know, homelessness is a big problem in California. According to some estimates, it's the worst here in California in anywhere in America. Some estimates even showed us of having close to half or a third of the homeless population, depending on what year you look at in the last couple of years, located here in California. It's everywhere. I'm sure you've heard the stories of tent cities in the Bay Area and Los Angeles without proper sanitation facilities. Well, today we're going to talk to some people who have potential solutions to fix the homeless crisis once and for all, or at least that's the way that it was explained to me. You, the viewer, will obviously decide. Our guests with us today are going to be three people. First is Eugene Mandelkorn. He's a producer on Lead the Way that introduces the concept of Angel City at the end of that movie, which is a solution for homelessness. We also invited Daniel Hempel, who's an expert on donations and philanthropy. He's recently been featured on Los Angeles television, talking about how you could change the whole homeless game if you could just make homeless shelters profitable to invest in which case we could direct $100 billion of stationary funding in the Los Angeles or California region into investment into homeless rather than having people just make charitable contributions to homeless. Finally, we'll be hearing from Dr. Jonathan Brand, who's a psychiatry specialist, and he's here to talk about the psychological impacts of being homeless on the streets and how well solutions to deal with homeless might be. But first, let's get into what exactly we're here for. I want to make sure this is the movie we're going to talk about, Lead the Way. I'm going to show you the screen here a little bit. We'll be talking with Eugene. And if you have any questions, I will be flashing this email up periodically throughout the show. Any questions at all, please email firstfeatures@mail.com, not gmail.com, not gmail.com. That's firstfeatures@mail.com, and that's how to speak to Eugene, the attractive gentleman in a green shirt. And then here is the website, Lead the Way. Let me show you a share screen real quick, just so you can see that video. This is the movie by First Run Features called Lead the Way. It's a movie about an autistic, blind Asian man who wants to run and become the president of America. It's what's considered some of the first solutions-based movie entertainment. At the end of the movie, the candidate, whose last name is Lee, introduces the concept of Angel City. You can find out more about this at First Features, LEED, The Way, Lead the Way. And there's the movie, a little bit about it, etc. Let's go to Eugene Mandelkorn. Now, Eugene, what is this movie? What is the fictional solution that is brought up? What does the movie talk about? What is the solution for homelessness presented by Mr. Lee in the movie, and how does this overlap with reality?
Well, of course, homelessness is almost an institution in LA. I mean, in all of California has homelessness, but this is one of the most one of the worst places in the world, the best place to live and the worst place to be homeless right now is LA, because they've been putting all kinds of money into it, but nothing's been a concrete solution. They've been basically moving the people around and more people coming all the time. So what we do in the film, Lead the Way, at the end of the original feature film, which hasn't been released yet, but is completed, at the very end of the film, he introduces the audience to Angel City. And Angel City is actually a major portion of the sequel to Lead the Way. So what we're doing is building a separate city within Los Angeles, a city within a city that is totally off the grid. In other words, it has its own utilities, its own electricity, its own water, and it's powered on solar. So it's similar in size to, say, there's a city called, not a city, but a development called Oberon. Oberon, I don't know if you know about Oberon Solar. It's a solar city in Southern California that they're building on 2,600 acres. And then there's another one in California that's around 4,700 acres called Topaz Solar. Okay, Topaz Solar. But we're building a city that runs on solar, but it also has the residential part of it. Each unit has its own system of power, of energy. And that's going to be like a city of the future almost. And the homeless will help build it. They will become part of it. And they will become part of the evolution of solar energy at the same time as an evolution for their own lives, moving themselves eventually into the society outside of Angel City. And hopefully this solution will spread around the world. So that's basically what it's about.
We're covering the Oberon solar project, which is, I believe, powered by the federal government, and they're looking at some area near Palm Springs under the Bureau of Land Management. Approximately 2,600 acres of BLM managed public lands near the Desert Center in eastern Riverside County, all powered by solar power, an entirely new independent city off the main power grid, completely renewably powered. Interesting concept. And what you're saying is that you would apply that concept of the Oberon City to Angel City, at least as far as power distribution goes.
And each of these homeless will have their own residence within Angel City. And the city will be surrounded by other structures that will have all of the other essentials for a city. And especially, it will have medical facilities, including psychiatric, drug treatment, all of the things that would be necessary for these people to forward their lives towards the point where they become constructive citizens of the United States and of the world. So they can function. That's their problem right now, is many of the homeless are not able to function in society.
I had heard a plan by Kevin Pathrath. Kevin Pathrath was a candidate in the California governor recall election, and he rose to a bit of fame because he had a solution for homelessness. And that was basically the cops would drive around LA and, quote, invite people to go to this homeless shelter that was kind of like a city located out on the outskirts of LA County in the high desert. And at this place, they would have all the services they need: psychiatric, medical, welfare, child, rehabilitation, job training, etc. But it would be almost an autonomous city in the desert, far away from LA. So the people would be sort of removed from LA and put out to this desert location where they would receive all the reform that they needed. And then hopefully they became rehabilitated and came back to Los Angeles. And the key point would be that the LA County police and LA County sheriffs would drive around asking people if they wanted to go to these shelters. I confronted Pathrath about that and said, what if people don't want to go? How are you going to get them to go to the shelter? And he absolutely refused to answer the question. How is your plan different from Kevin Pathrath's plan, at least at the conceptual level?
Well, probably because I've been talking with and know a lot of homeless people. In fact, when I was a young man, I lived in a tent in the center of the city. So I know a little bit about it. I have a lot of homeless friends now, and some of them will not, even though they've been offered to stay in places out in the desert outside of Los Angeles. They want to work and they want to live in LA, and they've lived in LA all their life. Some of them, I'm saying. and they don't want to be transported someplace else. So if there was a place they could live within LA or even within LA County, okay, not out in the way out in the boondocks, they'd be happy. And this is the thing. This is why I think that's why we have to work with the city, the county, and the state of California to get this contiguous property designated for Angel City, because it's about the size of Temple City, 2,500 acres or about 4 square miles. So I don't know if you're familiar with Temple City. That's a city in LA County that's exactly 4 square miles or 2,500 acres. And Temple City is a very successful city. And we're going to have approximately it will house approximately 100,000 homeless. It will cost upwards of $1 billion to construct. It will only cost, because of the way the city is built, right now about $15 million a year to keep it running, to keep the city running. So it's very inexpensive to run the city and very inexpensive to build the city. But the problem is getting the contiguous property, the 2,500 square acres. I'm not square acres, 2,500 acres, 4 square miles, contiguous. Yeah.
I'm showing Temple City right now. We showed how big it was.
It's
400 acres.
4 square miles or 2,500.
Yeah, about 4 square miles. It housed a
acres.
population of about 35,000 people in 4 square miles.
And we will be able to hold 100,000, and that's because our structures are smaller. They're tiny homes, not, and most of the homes in Temple City are fairly large. I think their average home size is about 1,000 or 1,200 square feet.
So they have about 35,000 in Temple City. You're saying a city roughly the same size as Temple City, and you would house a population about 3 times as much, and it would be in the LA area, but it would also be autonomous and powered by its own thing. And the big difference between your plan and Pathrath's plan is that people wouldn't be forcibly removed to some far distant
No, not forcibly removed.
in the city.
Okay, not forcibly removed. When the way it works in our city, you are admitted to the city, but first you have to be evaluated. Okay, of course you want to have to be part of the city. Okay, but you have to be evaluated. When you're evaluated for the fact whether you are addicted to drugs, whether you are mentally unstable, and then if you are, then you don't actually move into a unit. Okay, in Angel City, you will be in the facilities where you can get help, psychiatric help, or perhaps help in getting off of drugs, whatever the problem that and again, you have to want to, you know what I mean? You can't literally say, I have friends who obviously have problems that are homeless, and they may not want any psychiatric help because they don't believe they have a problem. You have to want help. You have to want help. That's important. Mm-hmm.
So where in LA County should this go? If it's going to be in the periphery, I'm going to pull up a map and share a screen, and maybe you guys could tell me, and then we'll get into a little bit more discussion on the psychological aspects here with the doctor in just a second. But here is LA County. Pathrath was talking about putting the people up here, which is still in LA County, but it's way outside of the city. You're in the desert, and it's really hard to get from here back into the city. I think you're talking about something that's closer to the urban area where people live. So where do you think it might go?
This is where we have to deal with the city and the county and see what parcels of land are available. First of all, we don't want it to be a large change in elevation. It's better if it's as flat as possible, okay, for the 2,500 acres. So there's only certain areas that would fit. But what we're doing in the movie, in the sequel, we don't have $1 billion to make the movie, okay, to make the sequel. So what we're going to do in the movie, we're going to pick out 2.5 acres in Los Angeles City or Los Angeles County, where we will shoot most of the film. And that is where we will actually start building. We're going to institute this. We're going to do what I guess you would call it a test case or a prototype of Angel City. And we will actually we will build it and we will move 100 homeless into Angel City, but only a 2.5 acre, not the 2,500 acres, but 2.5 acres. And the idea is to prove that it will work. So that's what we're doing in the film, and we're going to make it look like we've built the entire 2,500 acres, okay? So we'll use movie magic to make it look like, wow, the whole thing's there already. But all we will have is just the 2.5 acre prototype. And that's how we'll work out a lot of the bugs. We have to work out all the bugs before we actually build Angel City. But the biggest problem is getting, like you said, the 2,500 contiguous acres, to build it.
Do you know that there are 2,500 contiguous acres in the urban part of LA?
This is the problem. I'm working with a number of developers, and I wish they were on this call, and they're trying to locate that 2,500 contiguous. But we don't want to put anyone else out of their homes. We don't want, we don't want to take the property from other people to put for the homeless, there. So what we want to do is we're trying to find it, but it looks like we're going to have to go to the county, because so far they haven't been able to find this 2,500. They found 2,500, but not contiguous, that you could build the entire city.
I just pulled up real estate for sale in Los Angeles County by the acres. Most of the property, here's 2.5 in Palmdale.
2.5 right at the top.
Lancaster. So a lot in Lancaster, Palmdale, which is the area outside of the LA urban area. You said you didn't want to go, but here's one in Granada Hills. Here's one in Newhall. Those are in the LA area more. Although most of these are in Lancaster and the other desert area. Here's one in Malibu for 10 acres. So it's possible, but you'd have to look. There's one in Santa Clarita.
Could you call my wife, please? I'm on another phone call, please.
So let's get into some of the psychology of the situation. We've talked about a potential plan, having a separate city, Angel City, run on its own power, contiguous acres, somewhere in the LA urban area, somewhere on a flat piece of land that offers housing and a variety of services that homeless need, all congregated in one area to get better. Play off different plans we've heard before, but I'd like to go to Dr. Brand and talk about the obvious question that people watching this video would ask, which is, why not leave them on the streets? What's wrong with people living their whole life on the streets? Is that bad for people? Do they have to be in housing? How does this negatively affect people to live their life neglected on the streets? And how does that impact the rest of us in California society?
Well, I think you can look at it a number of ways. From the people on the streets themselves, it impacts on their self-worth, on their self-esteem, on their identity, how they feel about themselves. I think a lot of these people do not feel good about themselves. They don't necessarily enjoy living on the streets. It just is what has happened to them. Many of them have, very poor little support from their families. Many of them, as we've talked about, have severe psychological difficulties. Many have turned to drugs and alcohol. So they develop this lifestyle not necessarily because they love being that way. It's just they've sort of separated themselves from the mainstream, and they've got into this pattern of behavior, which is very difficult to change. And in my discussions with Gene, what this Angel City seems to be is, instead of giving them a hand out where you give them something, a temporary relief, whether it's economic, whether it's housing, and then many of them return back to Skid Row or wherever they were. They go back to the drugs, the alcohol, they don't take their psychiatric medication. My understanding is that the Angel City would give them a sense of self-worth, a sense of self-identity, a sense of building something that is greater than themselves. And I think a lot of them would welcome that opportunity if it was presented to them. As I understand it, they would live and work and actually build the Angel City in terms of the structures, in terms of growing the crops, the food, and that it would really give them some function, something to do with their life. And I think it would motivate many of them to get up off the street and participate in this kind of a venture. Now, as Gene has talked about, we'd have to have psychological services, we'd have to have psychiatrists, we'd have to have mental health workers, social workers, we'd have to have rehabilitation programs for the drugs and alcohol, and all that is very doable. Again, I think giving these people some opportunity would in itself motivate them to take their medication, to stay away from the drugs and alcohol, because they would have responsibilities and obligations and things to do. And a lot of them really would welcome having that, instead of getting up in the morning and having virtually nothing to do but sit on the street and consume their drugs and alcohol and, you know, whatever they do on the street. This would be an opportunity where they would have a more sanitary environment. They would have friends and neighbors. They would have people that would be helping them. And I think, you know, I've had a lot of these people as patients, and I do believe that a lot of them are very capable and very functional in the right setting and could really blossom in this kind of a situation of Angel City that we're talking about, if they were given that opportunity.
I'd like to ask you both two follow-up questions. This is for both of you to answer, you know, independently or as a team. The first question is, why hasn't this been done already? Obviously, viewers of the video are going to watch, and I don't know the answer myself. I'm just asking you guys, what do you think it is? Because people are going to hear this idea and they're going to go, well, if it's such a great idea, why didn't they already do it? So why do you think this idea hasn't already been done? And why is now the right time for it? You know, what's changed? Or why is it a good idea that people just have missed the train on? Did they under-evaluate it? Or was there some blockage before implementing this before that no longer exists?
Well, I can say that I think from just talking to people who have plans for solving the homeless problem, that people become too ingrained in their idea. So in other words, there's so many ideas flying around out there, okay? None of them really tested or true yet, okay? And the government gets all these different ideas. Which one are they going to implement? So they'll implement one, it doesn't work, they try another one. They implement, then that one doesn't work, they try another one. So what we're going to do with the movie is we're actually going to implement this one, and hopefully it will be so workable. And if there are any bugs, we'll work them out while we're making the film. And then hopefully they'll go with this one. But what I'm trying to do right now is I'm combining a lot of other people's ideas. I've done a lot of research. So I've done research in the small homes, the tiny homes. I've done research on solar. I've done research on growing food and exchanging, each one growing a different crop and exchanging it. so that everybody has the food that they need, being self-sufficient in a community. So these are all the things that have to be part of it, plus the facilities for medical, all of that has to be part of it. And if they don't have the whole plan together, it's going to fail. And that's what I think is, I think I've taken a little bit from a lot of different experiments and ideas and put together one that I think will really work.
Dr. Brand, I know it's a hypothetical question, but in your opinion, and we'll get into a little bit more detail on this, why do you think the solution hasn't been tried before?
Well, I've been a psychiatrist for 30 years, and I have heard of different things. I've seen different things being done for the homeless, programs where, for example, social workers, even psychiatrists, go to the streets, whether it's Skid Row or some other area in Los Angeles, and they go and they talk to and they treat the patients, and those are of some help. But I see this as something different. This is something where they would have an opportunity to have a community where they would work together, and they would build something greater than themselves. It would really be, I think, something potentially that would be a real game changer in terms of what's been offered before, a real change in their life and lifestyle, where I know I've talked to Gene about this, where it would almost be like a training or a junior college or, what have you. It would be an opportunity for these people to have a real learning experience, where instead of like with the fishermen and the fish, instead of just handing somebody a fish, it would give them an opportunity to learn how to fish, see? And then it would give them a way that they could go from Angel City either to being supervisors or running future type of cities, or going out in the community and even going to school, and for some of them maybe getting regular jobs and be more productive. See, I see this thing as all about giving these people a sense of worth so that they could be productive citizens in the country. I think many of them have the ability and the potential to do that if they were given the right opportunity. And so this program, I think, is quite a bit different than other programs I've seen, in terms of giving them that training, giving them that sense of self-worth, and giving them the potential to blossom and move from, beyond, the Angel City into, again, working with other such cities, and even or getting into the community and becoming productive people in terms of, going to school, working, because a lot of them are very bright people. And if they take their medication, if they stay away from drugs and alcohol, and again, if they have the proper motivation, a lot of these people could be productive citizens in the country and the world.
I want to show you guys a few newspaper articles about what the California government is trying to do with homelessness right now, and ask you both how this plan is different and would operate differently. This is something people who would want to support the plan would be asking, how is your plan different than what they're trying? So first, let's go back to this. This was last year, July 2021. This is the grade Californians gave Newsom for his response to homelessness, and it was basically poor. About over half of the population felt that he wasn't doing a very good job as of last year, only a year ago. Governor Newsom dedicated $12 billion to the state's homeless crisis. Of that $12 billion, $5.7 billion will be used for new housing, and $3.9 billion will be used for mental health programs, including behavioral veteran services. 1 second here. The state will use the $5.8 billion that's going to housing to convert more than 42,000 hotel and motel rooms into housing units specifically for homeless residents and people struggling with severe mental health conditions. Next, I want to show you this. Now, that was last year. The governor said, hey, we're going to spend $5.8 billion, almost $6 billion to convert 42,000 hotel and motel rooms to basically housing for people who are homeless and with severe mental health conditions. This year, February, about a month ago, Governor Newsom announces $116 million in funding for 7 home key projects across the state. These 7 projects will provide 387 housing units for people experienced or at risk of experiencing homelessness. I find that a little bit interesting that out of 116 million, he's only able to get 387 housing units, but that's the plan there. The other part to that plan, also announced around the time last month, or right after this plan was announced, was Newsom launches new plan to help Californians struggling with mental health challenges. At a mental health treatment center in San Jose, Governor Gavin Newsom unveiled the Care Court, a framework to provide individuals with mental health and substance use disorders the care and services they need to get healthy. The proposal, which must be approved by the legislature, would require counties to provide comprehensive treatment to the most severely impaired and untreated Californians and hold patients accountable to their treatment plans. The Care Court is about meeting people where they are and acting with compassion to support the thousands of Californians living on the streets with severe mental health and substance use orders. The Care Court does not wait until someone is hospitalized or arrested before providing treatment. Care Court will provide an opportunity for a range of people, including family members, first responders, intervention teams, and mental health service providers, among others, to refer individuals suffering from a list of specific ailments, many of them unhoused, and get them into community-based services. So last year, the governor said, I'm going to convert 42,000 hotel motel rooms. That'll fix homelessness. And then this year, he's saying, I'm going to put an additional 116 million, but I'm really only going to make 387 housing units. But on top of that, I'm going to create a new legal regime where anybody who works for the California government can say, well, I think you're insane, and I'm going to refer you to the Care Court. And then the Care Court will evaluate you. And if you are seen as insane, they will forcibly put you in a community shelter. How is your plan different than what California's proposed? You're on mute.
Okay, because it is a separate city. It is, in other words, here we're talking about how is that money going to be used? This is the whole state of California. How are they going to solve this problem? Here's billions of dollars that's going to be spent on individual buildings or individual cases around the state, who knows where, and how they're going to evaluate whether it works or not. I'm talking about taking where the problem is, the major problem in California. I mean, I'm not saying it's not in other cities, but once you solve it in one city, you can solve it in another city. One of the major problems, and I wish that Daniel was here, because he was talking about lowering the cost of individual units so you could afford to put people who are homeless into these units. He was talking about, I think the cheapest he said was around $200,000 a year, okay? Our units in Angel City, believe it or not, will range basically from $10,000 to $12,000 per unit. It sounds impossible, right? But why is it possible? Because you have to throw out the whole building structure that we have been doing for the past 100 years, okay? In other words, we use either wood and stucco, or we've used brick and mortar. This is called recycled plastic construction. It's not only, it's using the waste that is filling up dumps and filling up the shore in California. You know, plastic just destroying wildlife, destroying everything, because it's not being used for anything. It's recycled plastic buildings, and this is being done in other countries. And they're being built very quickly, not like the structures that we have now. It can take 3 to 7 days to build a recycled plastic home. tiny homes. So now we're talking about a very low cost per structure. So those are some of the things that can change the whole way that the costs and the implications of building the city and the time it takes to build it.
I want to show a little bit of a clip from Daniel Heimpel where he talks about this, and then we'll go to Dr. Brand about your opinion on how this plan is different than what Governor Newsom is showing. But just to show a little bit about Daniel Heimpel, he was going to be here. He's the donations and philanthropy expert. Let me show you a little bit of what he's talking about so you can understand what Eugene is getting at.
Public systems work, and I've always looked through the lens of public systems, but in this case I really started thinking about, well, who are the three major players trying to fix homelessness? And I come down to the public sector, the nonprofit sector, and ultimately philanthropy, and really thinking about philanthropy and how that money could be deployed in a way that would help get our unhoused Angelinos housed, and as a starting point to try to work on this problem. And so my basic thesis was, if these guys stepped up in a major way, we could really change the game and pretty quickly.
Yeah, and to get them to step up in that major way, I think most of us tend to think of the philanthropic element being something that folks with money and these organizations do out of the kindness of their own hearts, and maybe sometimes for a little tax deduction. But you're kind of making the case here, there's this whole other realm where it could actually be a solid investment. Can you kind of give us the Cliff Notes version of how you see this actually addressing homelessness, resolving homelessness, be something that is simultaneously profitable?
Well, under the way charitable foundations work, if you have a whole lot in Los Angeles County, they're sitting on about $100 billion in assets. And the way the federal government works in terms of its relationship to philanthropy is it compels them to spend 5% essentially of their total assets every year to go towards charity. Now, the 95% sitting in those endowments is nearly $100 billion in Los Angeles, is mostly in the private market and looking for investments that generate a market rate return or below market rate return. They really are trying to get to 8% a year. So if you're trying to get to 8%, you just need to find investments that will yield you that. And the way it works in the affordable housing and the homelessness space is if you can get the per unit price down and do it well still, you have the security of government investment.
I want to push back a little bit, Daniel, because if you go back.
So that is what Daniel Heimpel was talking about, that if you can get the cost per unit down, then you could make investing in homeless shelters profitable. And then you would increase the amount of people investing in homeless shelters. Right now, the way the housing market works is they say, we're going to give up 5% of our profits and invest in homeless shelters, which we know will not be profitable. But then because of that, they don't give more than 5%, which is the federal bar. And he's saying if you made it profitable, you could get the entire investment fund invested into homeless shelters. And Eugene's talking about how to reduce the per price unit cost of homeless shelters, and he's looking at Angel City to do it. Just wanted to clear that up a little bit. But quickly, let's go to Dr. Brand. Dr. Brand, what do you think about Governor Newsom's plan with the care courts? Is that acceptable that anybody who works for the California government could, I hope I didn't scare away the doctor. We just lost him for a second. Oh, there you are. What do you feel?
I'm sorry. I had a message. I had to clear. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What do you think about the California
please repeat
care
that?
courts?
Yeah.
Anybody who works for the California government, police officer, teacher, social worker, anybody can say, hey, that homeless person looks crazy. I'm going to refer him to the care courts. This person is mandated to go to that court. The court can decide if they are sane or not. And if the court decides that you're not sane, you're automatically placed in a housing facility, whether you want to be there or not. Is that a good idea? Is that fair? Is this a good way to deal with people with mental health issues?
Well, there's a process which is called a 5150 that I'm familiar with in terms of my psychiatric work, that if someone is on the street and they're presenting a danger to themselves or to others, they can be involuntarily put in a psychiatric facility, okay? I am not, that is something that's necessary for their own safety as well as the safety of the community. Offhand, I would not support something that would force somebody who is not a documented danger to themselves or others to force them into some sort of housing situation. I would like to think that many of these people, if they're presented with the opportunity, would voluntarily want to go to this kind of a situation like an Angel City, because again, I think it's very different from what Newsom is proposing. It's the idea going back to, again, not just handing somebody a fish, but teaching them to fish. And I think having the people invested and working to put together this community, on their own, sounds to me like a very different proposition than simply trying to give and force somebody to go into a housing project that is set up for them, because again, it's not something the people themselves are working at or invested in, and it's not really something that's part of their own work, part of their own flesh and blood that are working on the project. So I think this kind of thing is very different, and my hope would be that most people would not have to be forced into going into this kind of thing, that they would be open to the opportunity. Okay, so because I think you try to force somebody to do something, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. You might get them off the street temporarily, but then they're going to wind up back, before you know it, they're going to wind up back there. It's just not going to be a long-term viable solution.
So hard forcing people into a camp that they don't want to go to might not be a workable solution. Is that roughly what you're saying?
I don't think it is. I mean, it would be very temporary. I think most of the people would, you can't hold them in the camp at gunpoint. I think most of the people would probably, the ones that don't want to be there, would leave. And they would go back to where they were before. And it would not be a long-term solution to the problem.
What is the governor thinking then? I mean, his plan is to have people recommend anybody who seems insane to these courts. These courts will declare you sane or insane. If you're declared insane, you are forced into these camps. It sounds like you're saying that might not work because that you're forcing people to do something against their will in a country that's supposedly free. How is the governor missing this?
Exactly. I don't think it would work. And I also think there's a lot of issues, whether deeming whether somebody is sane or insane. It's not that simple. And I think you would have a lot of problems with that. I think people would get attorneys and they would protest these decisions. I think it would be a terrific mess to try to do that kind of thing. Again, the definition between sane and insane, people ask me all the time, what is normal? I've been doing this 30 years. There is no definition of normal. We have a DSM-5 that documents all kinds of psychiatric disorders. There is no definition of normal. I don't think there ever will be. So to try to get a court to deem whether someone is sane or insane, I think is a premise that is a failure from the beginning. I do not believe that is workable. I think it's going to introduce a lot more problems than it's going to solve.
We're going to go to Eugene real quick, but first I want to show you both something. So this is the video with Kevin Pathrath, and he ran for governor, and his plan for dealing with the homelessness is eerily similar to Governor Gavin Newsom's plan. Now, I have no proof of this, but I will point out that Kevin Pathrath rose to fame during the recall election for his plan for homelessness, and that Gavin Newsom's plan for homelessness, the Care Courts, was published after Kevin Pathrath produced his plan. So Pathrath comes out, he gets famous on his homeless plan the same year that Gavin Newsom is giving a failing grade on homelessness. And then the next year, we see Newsom come out with a plan that looks eerily similar to Pathrath's. I just want to play a short clip.
Okay, all right. Yeah, let's see what we got going on. Well, also because, it's just last time you told me sent your homeless plan to the homeless people. Okay. Because we have 10 other candidates who are going.
But yeah, I would say, let's get back to you on that. I don't know if in the middle of the day we can promise to be there because we do have.
1 second.
Agency to get people and move them to another area.
I mean, look, we're
Here we go.
do some project home people.
Okay.
You gotta give dignity back. You gotta give them the services that they need and want: food, shelter, mental health services, drug services. We're not gonna provide services to them.
So you,
No one's gonna lock down facilities. That's what Newsom does with this project home people.
you said nothing at all about using the military or a paramilitary group to round up people and move them into
We're not
another.
grounding anyone.
You said nothing like that at all. In no capacity, use any agency to get people and move them to another area.
I mean, look, we're going to use the National Guard to build our facilities and to staff our facilities. And we don't want to round anybody up. The rule is our facilities are completely optional. People can go to our facilities and get services they want. The only thing that will no longer be allowed is you can't sleep on the streets. So we can provide access for people to store their things, for people to have a comfortable bed, clean clothing, showers, and facilities where they are in the communities where they are. It's not like we're trying to bus people to some random area. That's why we're going to have 80 facilities so states so we can provide the services where they are. We just want to centralize what nonprofits are doing and what government's failing to do right now.
So what happens if people want to stay on the streets and they can't?
Well, they can stay on the street. You can go out on the street anytime you want.
But under your plan, you're saying get them off the streets. Okay.
You can go on the street all the time.
So
You can be up all night if you want.
Right.
You pass out on the street and need help. You're not.
So let's say
it's
right.
dangerous. It's deadly.
Yeah. So you're a governor.
Yeah.
People can't sleep on the streets. They sleep on the streets. What happens to them?
Well, if somebody passes out on the street, they either can't take care of themselves and they need support from the government, from either hospitals, or if they're a danger to themselves or others, with hospitals for that.
The other thing I want to show you real quick is this. This is for the audience members following along. Here's the article from Daniel Heimpel. Foundations should unleash their biggest assets, their asset to solve the homeless crisis. Endowment Developments came out March 9th, relatively recently. You can find his article where he explains his plan that we just showed you a quick clip of on the LATV on philanthropy.com. Again, foundations should unleash their biggest asset to solve the homeless crisis. Endowment Investments. And he basically lays out his plan that if you could make the per unit price cheaper, you can invest $9.7 billion and house roughly 66,000 homeless people. Again, there's the article. But let me go back to both of you. Can you force homeless people into these shelters? Because I'm hearing the governor saying, well, we're not going to do that, but it sounds like that's what you're going to try to do. And I confronted a recall candidate saying, that's not what we're going to do, but his plan sounded like that's what he's going to do. So what happens to people who say, I don't want to go? What do you do to them? How do they fit into this plan?
Well, first of all, you have to make it as attractive as possible for them to want to be part of this new city, okay? In other words, I don't think all of them are going to go at the beginning. There's going to be some that will go and some will wait. I mean, before I had an operation on my eyes so that I could see better, my wife wanted, before she would do it, she wanted me to try it first and see the results, okay? And then she ended up getting LASIK, okay, surgery. But she wanted me to try it first and see how it worked. And I think that's how people are normally. They're going to want to see it be, oh, it's working. And the guy who had the tent next to me, he's doing very well. I should also go there. So I'm saying you're not going to get everybody at once, but eventually you're going to get the majority of the people who are in Skid Row, and the problem will be solved. So that's
Dr. Brand. Dr. Brand, your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Gene. I think that to force anybody to do anything is just not going to work. It's not going to work. I mean, I don't think the jails are big enough to put everybody who refuses to throw them all in jail. So what are you going to do? I think the people that are refusing are going to, even if you do get them off the street, they're going to wind up back there. And I think it's just what Gene was saying. I think if you can convince a few to go to a place like Angel City, and then if they are enjoying their experience and they're building this city and their self-worth, their self-esteem is rising, they feel like they're learning, like they're doing something, and as well, it'll motivate them to stay off the drugs and alcohol, it'll motivate them to take their medication and make their lives better. And I think as they communicate with their friends and neighbors who are still on the street, I think it will bring more and more of them out of the street. Like Gene says, it'll be a gradual process. And I think, though, it'll be a more permanent process, because the people that do come out who get this education and training, I think will have a much better chance of maintaining these changes, hopefully making them permanent changes into them being residents of Angel City and or leaving and going out on their own and becoming productive. So I don't think there's any solution that's going to be 100% effective right away. It's just not realistic. But I do think that Gene's ideas with this Angel City is the best program that I've come across in terms of gradually getting these people off the street and motivated to have a better life. And I think as they do that, then other people will follow.
Eugene, thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much, I mean, I know what I want to do. Now, the thing is this making the sequel, of course, it's going to cost money to make it, okay? And we've made films before that were funded entirely by real estate investors, okay? But films that had nothing to, a film that had nothing to do with real estate. Now, this one actually has to do with real estate, and this fits in what Daniel had to say. People may want to invest in the film because they're interested in the idea and the possibility of making money by helping to build Angel City. This would also bring in that $100 billion that Daniel was talking about, because the per unit cost is so low. And the fact that it's a separate city, these people are now not impinging on the society outside of the city. They have their own city. They have a feeling of being someone and part of the future, because what happens is after 2 years, they can leave the city. I mean, they don't have to stay in the city. They can leave after 2 years, go into society. If they don't want to, if they want to stay in the city, they can actually be part of the governance of the city. Who knows? One of these homeless may end up being the mayor of Angel City. So I'm saying they know what they want. They're going to decide what they really want, and they're going to be leading the way to the future, because this is a city that is on the cutting edge of technology and is a totally green city, not, running on the old type of, what they would call it, the old framework of cities of the past. So everything is changing, not just the construction, but I mean, it's a solar city. It's got all these other aspects that help it to make it successful.
the Curitiba of America in the year 2020. Doctor, I know that you have to go. I'd like to give you a chance. 2 minutes, any final comments? Dr. Brand, anything you think the public should be aware of, should think about, should look into, things you'd like people to remember when they watch this show of the key importance, or things that you suggest the public could do to help this project along? Dr. Brand.
Well, I think that this program is the best thing that I've come across. You know, again, I've been doing this 30 years, and I think this is the best program that I have seen to uplift people, to get them motivated to get off the street and have more of a chance of having a permanent solution, a long-term solution, than anything that I've seen before. And I think the world really needs this, because the people need it. The people that in their community, they don't want the homeless people outside their front door. They don't want the people on the street. So they want it as well. And I think the whole key is to involve these people in the work and the productivity of their life. And Angel City seems to be the best opportunity. I think it really deserves a chance to be instituted and to try to evoke these long-term changes in these people and really give them an opportunity to change their lives, to invest in their life in terms of their own flesh and blood, their own work, and give them a chance to uplift themselves to a better future. And I believe it potentially could really help the community and be a real game changer, you know, unlike the other programs, you know, I have seen. You know, nothing is 100% effective. Nothing is going to work completely right away. But I do think that this has the best chance of anything I've ever seen, if we can get it instituted, to bring about long-term change and gradually, but effectively and hopefully permanently, take care of this homeless problem.
Thank you for coming out, Doctor. I really appreciate your insight and your participation, and I appreciate your concern as a Californian for the hundreds of thousands of people who are suffering from this condition. I know I have 3 personal friends who are homeless and frankly shouldn't be. So it's an issue that cuts personally. Appreciate your input. Eugene, final 2 minutes.
Thank you.
What would you like to say to people?
Well,
Thank you, Doctor.
The most important thing to me, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The most important thing to me is that we take action. A lot of talk and a lot of money wasted over the years, supposedly to help solve the homeless problem. Okay? Sometimes it's just a change in wording. Instead of calling them homeless, you might say I forget what some of the terms that they use, like without a house or whatever. But the whole idea is not to change the terms, to change the reality. And the thing is to build something that will last not for just today or tomorrow, but will last for decades to come, and will not only solve the problem here in California, but can solve the problem throughout the United States and eventually be exported around the world. Because homelessness is not just an LA problem or a California problem. It's a national problem and an international problem. And unless we really take action, nothing's going to solve it.
Appreciate that. You can find out more at leadthewaymovie.com. The final scene of that movie is where they talk about Angel City. If you'd like to talk to Eugene about this, you can email him at firstfeatures@mail, not Gmail, firstfeatures@mail.com. It is for Angel City, which will be an independent new city somewhere in LA, powered by solar, providing all the services that homeless people need to have. And if you'd like to know more about how the idea may be funded, look for this article. Foundations should unleash their biggest asset to solve the homelessness crisis. Endowment Investments by Daniel Heimpel, March 9th, 2022. I want to thank you both for being here. I deeply appreciate it. And if you have more people who'd like to talk about the idea and experts on the subject, or Daniel, I'd like to have you all back and continue to flesh out this discussion as it gets forward, because homelessness has been with us for quite a while. I think the problem took years to get this bad. I remember when we were coming out of the recession in 2014, and people were talking about levels of homelessness never before seen in San Francisco. Nobody wanted to hear about it in 2014 or 2015. People wanted to hear, we're getting out of the recession and there's jobs, and that's all they wanted to hear about. So they didn't want to hear, oh, we're coming out of the recession with a massively horrible Gini coefficient. So the difference between the rich and the poor is getting even wider, and we're having massive amounts of new homeless, and the pricing in the housing market is massively going out of whack. Nobody wanted to hear that. 2014, 2015, 2016. They wanted to hear the recession's over and we're getting back to work. Well, that allowed this problem to exacerbate and incubate. And we have allowed this to get this bad. It's not like it wasn't known. People just really started focusing on it like 2018, 2019. Well, that was when it was already a devastating stage. So I'm not sure we're going to get out of this in a month or two. I don't think big, bold measures are going to pop us right out of this. I know the governor's trying to do that, but Governor Newsom seems like a guy who likes to propose big, bold measures. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to fix the problem. And as we see in government and society, it takes years of dedication and stewardship to see a program through and make sure that it's implemented properly all the way through. Just because you announced a thing and dedicated funding doesn't mean it's going to work. Talk to anybody in government and use the phrase, throw money at the problem, and see what they have to say. It doesn't automatically solve the problem. You have to watch, you have to steward, you have to make sure, you have to be there for years. It seems like you two are dedicated to this topic for the last few years, and maybe you'll be dedicated in the future years, but it's something to watch. So I'd like to make this place available for future discussions on potential solutions for homelessness and evaluating the other solutions. And I want to say thank you for both coming out, and thank you for sharing your time, and thank you for being concerned about this issue that affects so many Californians.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Thank you for having us.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I'll send you a link to the show and we'll go from there. Thanks again.